Waterfront East LRT virtual consultation. We will be starting as close to 7 as we can. As you just heard, the meeting is being recorded. Your camera will be turned off and all attendees are muted. If you're having connection issues, you can also call into the meeting by dialing the number on the screen and enter the webinar ID, then the passcode. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please contact Alex Furneaux. You can see his email on the slide. You can always post in the chat as well if you're having technical difficulties, and we can help you. I'm just going to do a couple of logistical items before we get started. Of course, we would love to meet in person, but we aren't able to do so. So we're hosting this meeting on Zoom. During the conversation, after the presentation, you will be able to ask questions as well. You can ask questions during the presentation, and you can click on the Q&A at the bottom to pose your question, or in the chat as well. If you want to pose a question verbally, you can do so by clicking raise hand on the bottom. So in the Q&A control, you'll see here, all the questions will be listed. If you are interested in someone else's question being answered, you can also use the upvote button, which is a like. You can see that underneath the questions. And during the meeting, we will read all of the questions that we can out as we go. If you are calling in over the phone, you can press *9 to raise and lower your hand. And when I call on you, you can press *6 to unmute yourself. And of course, I will remind you of this as we go after the presentation in terms of how to participate. So thanks so much for joining. I will now pass it over to Waterfront Toronto to do the land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everyone. As many of you know, today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. We take this day to honor and uplift our Indigenous partners and all Indigenous people who have been stewards of the land and water. We also reflect on the recent discoveries in Manitoba and British Columbia, the impact of systemic discrimination exemplified through the residential school system continues to harm Indigenous peoples today, and we should not dismiss our actions as relics of history. The lessons of residential schools may be painful for us to confront, but it is necessary for true reconciliation. There is rich Indigenous knowledge and culture that we strive to honor and incorporate along our designated area of the waterfront, which is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We continue to learn how we can take action in our own way to support Indigenous voices today and every day. Hello, everyone. I'm Pina Malazzi. I'm the Vice President for Design at Waterfront Toronto, and I want to welcome you all to our second Public Information Center on the Eastern Waterfront Transit. Tonight, we're excited about how the design continues to advance for the 2A area. That's the area of Queens Quay between Bay Street and Parliament Street. We're also excited to show some early design ideas for the area that we call 2B, which is the area east of Parliament Street and Cherry Street. As you all know, consultation and feedback is critical to our design process. So I'm very excited and look forward to hearing what everyone has to say tonight about the work that we're presenting. And Waterfront Transit continues to be the top priority for Waterfront Toronto. As people begin to move into East Bayfront and call it home, transit becomes increasingly important as a catalyst for sustainable development. So we've got a long presentation tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric for a few words from the TTC.
Thank you, Pina. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Chu. I'm the Manager of Project Development and Coordination at the TTC. Thank you all for attending tonight and taking time from your busy schedules to be here with us. The TTC is excited to be working with partners at the city and Waterfront Toronto on this important project to expand transit along the waterfront. I actually used to live in a condo near Sherbourne and Esplanade that looked south to the lake. And over the 4 years that I lived there, I watched a whole bunch of new developments get added to Queens Quay East. The community down there is growing and it is increasingly becoming a destination. Despite any uncertainty in the short term from the pandemic about transit ridership, there is no doubt that the future of mobility in the city has to include an expanded transit network that will provide people with transit that is safe, convenient, and reliable. From the TTC's perspective, it is essential that we build the right solutions that will provide flexibility for our service and serve how customers will travel in the future. Thank you again, and we look forward to hearing your feedback and your advice.
All right, now to Councillor Cressy to open the meeting.
Well, first of all, thank you to our members of the City of Toronto staff team who are here tonight, as well as Waterfront Toronto and the TTC, and everybody for joining. I mean, we already have more than 200 people on the line and more dialing in, and I hope you're all doing well. Listen, a number of us, more than 300 of us, gathered together just a few months ago to look at the Waterfront East LRT as our city team quickly moves towards 30% design and getting this built. And so tonight, the team is coming back with updated design and design revisions. And it's exciting because I think what it starts to show is that you can build transit and build dynamic waterfront public realm gathering places at the same time. And that's what we have to do here. And so, listen, you're not here to listen to me. You're here to see the presentations and ask questions. But I will just tell you to help frame this: that great cities invest in transit. Our city, like so many others, was designed to move cars, and in the 21st century, we have to redesign our city to move people and move people quickly and safely. And there's no area like the Waterfront East in desperate need of transit. I mean, for goodness sakes, neighborhoods were built and they're now occupied on the basis of transit coming. And I'm delighted that finally this long overdue transit line is going to be built. And the critical piece here is getting to 30% design, which is where we're just about at now, is what triggers the budget process so that we can get shovels in the ground and get this transit line built in the coming years. And so with that, I'll turn it back to our team and really looking forward to the presentation and hearing all your feedback and questions tonight. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Cressy, Pina, and Eric. Before I get into the agenda and to tell you what we're going to cover tonight, I'd like to do some introductions with the team. So I'm just hoping we can drop the slide and you can see everyone's faces. Okay, great. So for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Liz McCarty and I'm with Lura. We are an independent third-party facilitation team that's going to help with this meeting. The other thing that we get to do based on the conversation from tonight, as well as the questionnaire responses that we receive, is that we will be writing a report to submit to the city, Waterfront Toronto, and TTC and the team to help advise the work moving forward. With me tonight is James Knott, Alexander Furneaux, and Haley Anderson. So that's our team. I'm going to go through the rest of the team and you can see them all here, but I'd love if you could just wave when I call your name, and I hope I don't miss anyone. And if I do, pop off mute and remind me so. So I'm going to start with the City of Toronto. So we have Brent Fairbairn. Hi, Brent. Jane Naiman. Nigel Tahar. Tom Davidson with Councillor Cressy's office. Tom is there. Hi. All right. From the TTC, we have Christina Joseph. Alexa Aiken. Scott Haskell. Steve Stewart, Michael Stevenson, and Vincent Tang. From Waterfront Toronto, we have Alex Mirio, Katie Andrzejczyk, Pina Malazzi, who you just met, and Sonia Vangeli. From Arup, also known as the design team, Marc-Paul Gauthier. All right, and did I miss anyone? Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So we are here tonight. You'll hear from some of the team members for the presentation. And as everyone has mentioned, most of tonight is to hear from you because we want your feedback during these conversations. We have about 250 people tonight, which is really exciting. It's the second longest day of the year. And we know this must be important for you. So as I mentioned, our team is here to listen, hear questions that you have, as well as what you like, what you don't like, and maybe what's missing. So I'm just going to go over the agenda quickly before we move into the presentation. So as Pina mentioned, essentially, we are going to present to you an update on what's known as Area 1. So it's the underground works as well as Bay Street. Area 2A, which covers Queens Quay East street design. Area 2B, which is Queens Quay Extension and Cherry Street. We're going to talk about phasing and implementation, and also an update on the transit project assessment process. Following that, what we'll do is we'll open it up to our question and answer or discussion period, where you can provide us with input on what you've seen tonight, or we can answer any questions. We had lots of people register interest to participate tonight, so we actually extended the meeting by about 30 minutes. So our goal is to go until 9 p.m. Something important also to note is that there will be a questionnaire that's available as soon as tonight until July 6th to make sure you can provide more input, or other people who haven't been able to participate tonight or to be able to provide comments. The deck or the presentation, as well as this meeting recording, will be posted on the project webpage. So many of you were probably involved in our winter engagements. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we did and what we heard. And then I will pass it to Nigel from the city, who will start with the overview presentation. So from December 2020 to March 2021, we had a stakeholder advisory group meeting, and we do have a stakeholder advisory group for this project, as well as a land use advisory group. We had a virtual public meeting with about 364 participants and an online questionnaire, which garnered 488 submissions, as well as focused stakeholder meetings and meetings with representatives from the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. You can visit the project website to access the full summary of engagement in round 1. I'm just going to touch on some of the key things we heard. And then our team, or the team, is actually going to try and show you how ideas and input was integrated along the way in each of the pieces. So in terms of the portal location, there was support for potential to create iconic public spaces and reduce transportation conflicts in the portal option west of Yonge Street. There were concerns for environmental impacts, obstruction of Lakeview, and water transportation were noted, related about the partial infilling of Yonge Street slip related to the option west of Yonge Street. In terms of network phasing, there was general support for phased development with through service along Queens Quay West and East, while the Queens Quay Ferry Docks and Union Station are reconstructed. Again, as a reminder, this is just a summary and additional details on how the feedback was incorporated into the design updates you will hear throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, great. In terms of the Queens Quay Ferry Dock stations, feedback emphasized the importance of signage and wayfinding accessibility improvements, planning for peak demand, station beautification, and future-proofing the designs. And for Queens Quay East street design, there was support for differentiating the Martin Goodman Trail from the promenade to mitigate conflicts between people walking and riding bikes. And there was general support for proposed seating areas, lighting, hardy vegetation, and wayfinding improvements. Again, this is just a highlight of what we heard, and hopefully you can see some of the ideas as how the feedback was incorporated in the presentation tonight. So with that, I will pass it over to Nigel to start the presentation. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Liz, and everyone else for the introductions to get us started tonight. Before we get into the details of the design and where we are with the project, I'll just do a general overview of this phase of the project and what we were directed to do before we get into those details. So first of all, we were directed by council to complete 30% design and preliminary design and engineering for the project. This includes a business case and a TPAP, which we'll provide more information on. The scope of the project is from Union Station south and east towards Cherry Street. And we'll present some ideas later on about where we think this line should end on Cherry Street. So starting with the first component, which is Area 1, this is being managed by the TTC. This is the Union Station to Queens Quay component, and it also includes the existing portal on the west side of Bay Street and a proposed new portal on the east side of Bay Street on Queens Quay. The second component of the study is the surface section, starting at the portal where it meets Queens Quay, roughly at Yonge Street, and extending over to the silo building that's just on the east side of Parliament Street. The final section of the study is a new section of Queens Quay that will be built over to Cherry Street in the coming years, and then a connection that ends at some point on Cherry Street. That's the overall scope of the project. Next. In terms of the timeline and where we are today, we're in our second round of public consultation. We have one more that we are planning in the early fall of this year, and that will lead to a report on the project to executive committee and to council for a decision and direction. Now, the date that we're targeting for that final report is October 27th, which is executive committee. And following that, it will be city council in November. We're generally on schedule for this project, although time is compressed as we get into the summer period. And following the report to city council, we'll be presenting the overall costs of the project, the 30% design, the business case, and also our notification to proceed with the environmental project report. This all sets us up, as Councillor Cressy said, in time for the budget process, which goes into early next year. Next. In terms of upcoming report, we do a number of interim update reports. And just last week, I did mention at our SAC meeting that we are aiming for the latest update report to Executive Committee on July 6th. The update report has since been updated. That's what happens in just a week's time around here. And the Waterfront project, as well as the Eglinton East LRT project, won't be covered in that update. That report is focused on all of the other major transit projects that are going on in the city right now, and that's the focus of the report. But look out for further updates. Actually, sorry, we won't have a further update. The next report will be our own project report that's to come in the fall. And with that, I will turn it over to Vincent from the TTC to provide you with update and design refinements for Area 1.
Great. Thank you, Nigel. Hello, my name is Vincent Tang, and I'm the TTC Project Manager for the Underground Focus Area 1. So tonight I'll be presenting the update to the preliminary design of Union and Queens Quay ferry dock stations, including new information on the portal design. I will also speak to the opportunity for Bay Street enhancement. Next slide, please. So here's the latest station platform plan at Union. To recap from our last update back in February, the major proposed scope of work at Union includes reconstruction of the existing single platform station to accommodate up to a total of 4 new streetcar platforms. And also as part of the rebuild, we will be providing, as you can see from the sketch here, new crossover tracks that would allow each platform to operate independent of each other, thus providing the operational flexibility for the streetcars. In terms of the new entrance connections, this plan, the updated plan shows the latest design development where we have 4 key accessible connections to the expanded station. So just highlighting that, going clockwise from the, let's say, the top right, we have the northwest entrance to Union Station retail concourse level. At the top left, we have the southwest entrance to the future Union Station new south concourse. At the bottom of the sketch, we have the east entrance to the Bay East Teamway level. And finally, at the extreme right-hand side of the sketch, we will be maintaining the existing pathway connection to Line 1 subway. Next slide, please. So let me highlight some of the key aspects of the design that have been progressed based on previous public feedback. And as Nigel said, this is important as the design continues to evolve towards a 30% design level completion. So the updated design now recommends a full station build-out with 4 new streetcar platforms in phase 1 implementation of the project. And to ensure maximum pedestrian flow to meet the future projected ridership demand, and at the same time reduce platform overcrowding, the design also maximizes the use of pedestrian pathways and platforms, including protection for placement of seating for the public. So, and based on further design coordination with Metrolinx and other stakeholders, the size and location of the proposed entrance connections have been refined to ensure, first of all, ease of access, wayfinding, connectivity between the adjacent building and GO Transit, which now includes a fairly direct indoor access route to the new GO bus terminal from the east entrance. Now, there was strong support based on previous feedback for seamless fare-paid access between the streetcars and the Line 1 subways. And as such, that feature will be kept, and we will not be introducing a fare line between streetcars and subway. And lastly, on this slide here, just to note that the design will further be developed to ensure that the station finishes will be really high quality, durable, and the design also protects for good opportunity to integrate station art into the station walls. So one example for station art is the big wall along the loop to the right. Other suitable wall areas in the station will continue to be explored for station art, which will be selected through the TTC's public art selection process. Next slide, please. So this slide shows updated rendering view for the station looking north, reflecting again the recommended full station build-out and highlighting the 4 key connections into and out of the station. So one key thing to point out for the southwest entrance is that transit users who want to catch, let's say, a southbound streetcar from the GO platforms in the vicinity, or even after Raptors game in the Scotiabank Arena, they will now have a much more direct and closer indoor route as opposed to the currently where they have to walk all the way to Front Street and access the streetcar station from the Union subway station area. Next slide, please. Lastly, for Union Station, here's a cross-section of the new station showing really an idea of the station reconstruction and its relationship from the TTC track and platform level as it relates to the Union Station retail concourse level, the Bay Teamway and street levels, and lastly, the GO Transit platform level at the top. Next slide, please. Now moving on to Queens Quay Ferry Dock Station. Again, to recap, the major proposed scope of work at this station includes reconstruction of the existing 2 platform stations to accommodate a total of similar to Union 4 streetcar platforms. Based on further design coordination with stakeholders, again, the design continues to protect for good accessible access to and from each streetcar platform. On the sketch here, you'll see that the main station accesses are located on the south side or the left-hand side of the sketch, where on the west platform or on the top half of the sketch, we have enhanced entrance with a larger elevator and larger stairs to the street level. On the east platform, we have further coordinated with the city to ensure that the future redevelopment of the site at 11 Bay will incorporate an integrated access to the street level. One key new feature to highlight also is the level crossing between the streetcars that we have added to allow ease of access between platforms during regular day-to-day service when passenger volumes are lower. Now drawing your attention to the cross section of the station at the bottom right corner. I apologize for the smallness of that cross section, but the key things to highlight is that in the next few slides, I will just talk to the design update to the proposed pedestrian tunnel level, which is at one level beneath this track level. And on the plan sketch here, you can sort of see the outline of this pedestrian tunnel beneath the platform level. Next slide, please. So this is a north-south section cut through the pedestrian tunnel that shows again the relationship of this tunnel level in relation to the other levels above. So to recap, the proposed pedestrian tunnel here connects passengers between the station platforms and also allows passengers to exit to or enter the station from the south side of Queens Quay via a new weather-protected accessible entrance that is currently located at the southeast corner of Queens Quay and Bay Street. Next slide, please. So this is an updated rendering of the station looking south that really clarifies the relationship between the various different station levels and the connecting tunnels and portals. So we can see the proposed new platform level with the connecting east-west running streetcar tunnel to the south, or really on the top of the page, where really streetcars can enter from or exit to the Queens Quay street level above. With the main accesses located at the south end of the station box, pedestrians and transit users leaving the station platform areas and wanting to go to the ferry docks terminal, let's say, have the option of taking an indoor route by going down to the pedestrian tunnel level, which allows them to exit to the south side of Queens Quay. Okay, next slide, please. Now going down to the pedestrian tunnel level, showing some renderings. And the main image on the left shows this new tunnel link with access to this level, to the different levels above. The two images on the right shows an idea of the station finishes and public art opportunities. Okay, next slide, please. So again, highlighting some of the key aspects of design, we have heard really good support for keeping the underground pedestrian tunnel as good underground alternative to get to the south side of Queens Quay. So the updated design maintains and further enhances the proposed underground link to the south side of Queens Quay by really providing a fairly generous 6-meter wide tunnel connection, and it provides really ample space also to accommodate event crowd and ample seating. And similar to Union Station, there's a good opportunity to integrate station finishes and station art into the station walls. So this is, you can sort of see that from the rendering ideas to the right, where the design team has begun to explore different high quality and durable station finishes and materials in the context of the waterfront area. All right. The design, if you can go back to the previous one. The design also protects for a good integrated connection to the adjacent properties, which includes future redevelopment of the site at the 11 Bay. Next slide, please. So from our last public meeting, limited information was provided for the streetcar portal. So this slide and the next few ones provides a first glimpse into the current design development. For the plan view on the top half of this page, I should clarify that orientation-wise, north is pointing to the bottom, and the lake is just off the page on the top. So from the plan view, we have the new east portal and canopy on the left-hand side of the sketch, and the reconstructed west portal and new canopy on the right-hand side of the sketch. The red dashed lines show an outline of the Queens Quay station, the new station entrances, and the new tunnels leading to these portal structures. The bottom half of the page shows a cross-section cut along the portals and the tunnels, looking towards the lake and the Jack Layton ferry docks terminal. This shows really the scale of the proposed underground structures in relation to the existing buildings in the background, as well as the relationship between the pedestrian tunnel link that I discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So again, based on previous public feedback, the design continues to protect for the potential of earlier east-west streetcar service. To minimize unauthorized vehicles from entering the portals, options have been considered and will be available to minimize these events, especially the west portal. Some options include, but not limited to, installing curbs, bollards, and enhanced markings. And also, we actually do have the embedded tracks within the portal area that will allow these unauthorized vehicles a second chance to leave the tunnel before it's too late. So lastly, mentioned about the streetcar portals is there are some concerns about streetcar noises. So in addition to noise reducing measures that have actually been already implemented in the current low floor streetcars, the new requirement to rebuild the existing west portal really allowed the design team an opportunity to further optimize the track design to further reduce the noise generated from streetcars when moving into and from the station. Next slide, please. So with the portal construction, there's really a good opportunity to provide architectural canopies on top of the new portals to serve as iconic gateways to the waterfront. These renderings with different view angles present some preliminary ideas that the design team is currently exploring. From these images, you can sort of see that the portal design geometry reflects the form of the track profile and clearances around the overhead streetcar power cables and vehicles. The portal canopy design really facilitates clear lines of visibility at the street level for pedestrians and cyclists. And the canopy structure currently envisions a sort of a primary arched rib structure made up of a steel profile with an what we call an inlaid wood system. On top of that, an architectural woven steel fabric will be used to create the canopy skin to provide a low maintenance option for the canopies. So these materials are really intended to capture the differing light conditions during the day and lighting strategies for nighttime animation that could introduce potential colors and or transitions that could be coordinated with vehicle movement. So as the design moves forward and continues forward, we will further explore how the structure can reflect the site-specific conditions of the waterfront and its connection with the experiences of the lake and the proposed Young Street slip and infill, and further testing of the options materials will be developed in future design phases, including the lighting design, different patterns and opacities on the skin material that I mentioned before. Next slide, please. So with the construction of the Union and Queens Quay stations, much of the Bay Street between Front and Queens Quay will need to be rebuilt towards the end of the project. So the project team recognizes that this is a fantastic opportunity to build Bay Street back differently than it is today. So with that opportunity in mind, if you can go to the next slide. The design team will be looking for public feedback for which design element to prioritize along Bay to enhance the street when it is rebuilt. So this includes looking at various key public realm and urban design elements that's listed on the slide here. It is not possible to incorporate everything as part of the current public consultation. We're really seeking the public's feedback for which element to prioritize in order to allow the design team to really take those feedbacks and further investigate and feed into the design development process. And based on these important feedbacks, more refined plans for Bay Street, working with Waterfront Toronto and our city partners, this will be more made available in our next round of public consultation in the fall of this year. Okay, so this concludes the area one of the update. I will now hand over to Alex from Waterfront Toronto to continue with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Vincent. So I will just be speaking about areas 2A and 2B, that's the surface section. of Queens Quay. So starting with 2A, that's the section from Bay Street to just east of Parliament Street. And most of these items are just updates from our previous public meeting in the winter. So starting with the portal location. So in the winter, we had presented to the public 2 potential options for the portals. Those are the portals that Vincent just showed renderings of, where the streetcar comes from underground and gets to grade. And we looked at an option 1 east of Yonge Street, which was previously identified as a preferred option in the 2010 environmental assessment. And then we looked at an option west of Yonge Street. And the main reason for looking at the option west of Yonge Street was through the design process for option 1, it revealed a lot of cost savings with reducing the portal length, as well as a reduction to construction impacts. And we also got public feedback and stakeholder feedback, and there's majority consensus that option 2 also enhances transportation safety, enhances public realm opportunities at the base of Yonge Street, partly because of all the cost savings, and a reduction to construction impacts. So as well as consulting with the public in the winter, we also had discussions with Toronto Water, Aquatic Habitat Toronto, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the residents of 10 Yonge, 10 Queens Quay. That's the buildings across the street from Yonge Slip. So with that, we've taken portal option 2 further into the design. So we're taking that further into the 30% design. I wanted to show the concept for the Yonge Slip fill, which was shown in the winter public meeting. And we got feedback from the public as well as from the residents across the street about some concerns with the slip fill, particularly with reference to the buses being parked in parallel to the street, and the worry that those buses would block views to the water. So we've revised the design through the design process and come up with the version we're about to show. That's the summer 2021 version, which realigns the buses so that they're perpendicular to the street and brings them closer to the hotel, so we don't impact the current views that are enjoyed to the water. I just also wanted to highlight that the blue hatch line on the left in the existing condition, that shows where the current dock wall is. And then the red line and the 2 images in the middle and to the right, that indicates where the new dock wall would be for those respective options. So just a little bit more on the design update of Yonge Slip. So we heard a lot of good feedback. As mentioned earlier, the opportunity with this concept to create an iconic public realm at the base of Yonge Street. So that's what we see here, with about half the slip fill being a public park as well as a wave deck, integrated also to the park on the left side of this image, a future park to the east of the Yonge Slip, which is currently a parking lot. There are plans to turn that into a public park as well. There's also a lot of public support for water taxis and recreational watercraft in the Yonge Slip. So it's our ambition to maintain the marine activity that's in the slip today. We don't want to hinder that, and also open up the opportunity for more access to the water from the public. We've also heard feedback about enhancing pedestrian circulation from the street to the wave deck. So we've added crosswalks as well as an island median in the middle here, where bus loading happens, to better connect people from the street to the wave deck. And as I mentioned earlier, the buses are now oriented to the west side of the slip, or the right side of this drawing, closer to the hotel. They're actually parked in this image, not on fill, but where the current driveway to the ferry docks and the parking is in that location. And so we did our best to keep the buses to that orientation and that side of the facility. So here are just a couple of additional updated renderings. So on the left is the plan view. As you can see, a good portion of this facility and the integration with the public space to the left. So we're really doing our best to create an iconic situation at the base of Yonge Street with great public realm and great access to the waterfront. There's another image in the middle top of the wave deck with the transportation facility to the right. And the top right image, that transportation facility for cars to access the hotel. and buses and trucks to circle around, and trucks to access the ferry docks, as well as deliveries and things that go to the island via this route. We also show a rendering in the bottom right showing opportunities for recreational watercraft launch. So moving on to another item that we consulted on in the winter, and that's how the intersections would be treated at the arrival zone, so the head of slips. So we took Jarvis Slip as an example in this case. So in the winter, we showed an option 1, which is a more delineated, and really I'm just focusing on the intersection here. So in the delineated option 1, the Martin Goodman Trail asphalt would continue through the south side of the intersection, and the north-south crosswalks for pedestrians would extend south of the Martin Goodman Trail. There would be a push button. So the intent there is to further delineate the space of trail users and the space for the pedestrians. Whereas in option 2, we looked at an alternative where there would be more of a mixing zone. So the trail would stop and it would be a pedestrian area, and cyclists would have to slowly navigate through that part of the intersection. So through public feedback and stakeholder feedback, option 1 was preferred, and that's what we've carried forward through to 30% design. So some of this is just a screenshot from the roll plans. I wish we could be in the same room and we could actually roll these roll plans out on the table, but this is what we can do for now. We can I just highlight some of the feedback and how we've addressed it. So extending those crosswalks south of the trail, the continuation of the Martin Goodman Trail asphalt through the intersection, as well as additional seating at the head of slip, and also opportunities to integrate this head of slip with the public amenities to the right. So in the case of Jarvis Slip, that would be Sugar Beach. And so there's an opportunity to build the wave deck here to better facilitate that desire line from Jarvis and the Cherry Beach North to Cherry Beach South via the intersection. Unfortunately, we can't extend the wave deck across the full slip because, as many of you know, that's where the sugar boats land to unload the sugar, the raw sugar. So that's important to maintain that marine activity there. So now over to Parliament Slip, and in the left here, this is the existing condition where Queens Quay East, just when it gets to Small Street, turns into Parliament Street as Parliament Street veers north and north of Lakeshore Boulevard. So really this intersection will undergo a complete reconfiguration with Parliament Street straightening out and teeing into what will be Queens Quay East and the extension of Queens Quay East parallel to Lakeshore all the way to Cherry Street. So to enable that realignment of those two roads, we need to partially fill in Parliament Slip. So I've indicated here the slip requirement fill and the red line where the new dock wall would be. That's a part of this project. Whereas the actual programming of the slip, and you may have seen some other consultation or outreach from our communications team on the possibilities and our vision for Parliament Slip, and how that is actually the Parliament Slip itself and how it's designed and programmed will be part of a different consultation process. It's part of a different project. So stay tuned for more updates on Parliament Slip and how you can be involved in that design process as well. So here's just another view looking at that new intersection of Parliament Street and Queens Quay East Extension in the context of the Quayside development. So here's just another view of Queens Quay East. This is probably familiar to you. It looks similar to Queens Quay West with the exception of the planting buffer between the Martin Goodman Trail and the TTC right-of-way, as well as the Martin Goodman Trail being wider. But this is no different than what we showed back in the winter. And here's just another view, and I'll just of an intersection, and I'll just highlight the extension of the crosswalk to the south side of the Martin Goodman Trail to further delineate the trail users and the promenade users. And so here's just a typical cross section. This is the cross section we want to achieve across Queens Quay East to Parliament Street. There are some pinch points, however, where existing land use won't allow us to realize that full vision. So in particular at 95 Queens Quay East, there's a stretch there where our full right-of-way that I showed in the previous slide, we won't be able to build that full right-of-way given the constraints of this location. So this is where we'll have to pinch the Martin Goodman Trail will have to be 3 meters instead of the 4.5 that was shown in the previous image. And the pedestrian promenade will also have to get pinched here. But the idea is still to maintain both a promenade condition and a Martin Goodman Trail condition through here. They're just narrower, and we would also lose the planted buffer between the trail and the TTC right-of-way in this condition, although railings would be placed along the south side of the streetcar right-of-way to further separate the trail users from the streetcar. So now getting into area 2B, so this is mostly new information. We'll talk about the scope, and then I'll get into the cross-section, how it differs slightly from the rest of Queens Quay East, and then some options for how we get under the rail corridor. So just recap, this is area 2A, which I just spoke to, which ends at the silos here. And then area 2B takes over, and this is the extension of Queens Quay East. So Queens Quay East doesn't exist, this location now. And then tying into New Cherry Street. So New Cherry Street is going to be under construction as part of the Portland's flood protection project this year. You can see where the new bridge is across the Keating Channel. That's the transit bridge. So you can imagine that's where New Cherry Street will cross. So if you were ever down there biking on Old Cherry Street and you thought, oh, why is the bridge over there? It's because Cherry Street is being realigned as part of that project. So the scope for this project is to design the streetcar through that section of the roadway, as Portland's flood protection will deliver the street as well as the public realm, but not the streetcar through that section. So then there's another tricky part, and that's how we get under the existing rail corridor, how we get the streetcar under the rail corridor and then tie into the existing line that currently ends at Distillery Loop. So here's a cross-section of the Queens Quay East extension. You'll notice not a whole lot of changes to the rest of the other part of Queens Quay East, although there is some more opportunity for additional plantings and green infrastructure in the buffer zones and all of the buffer zones. So we really try to enhance that and an immersive pedestrian experience between the green infrastructure of the plantings and the promenade. So I'll just talk about some of the options we looked at for the Cherry Underpass. So the cross section you're looking at is the existing Cherry Street where it goes under the rail corridor, just north of Lakeshore Boulevard. So the option 1 to the top left, to get the streetcar through there, this option requires a full reconstruction of that structure. So the pink box there, that's what I'm indicating as being a new structure. So that's quite an extensive rebuild of that area, of that facility rather. Option 2, below that one in the bottom left, this is where we don't touch the existing structure and we run the streetcars through the existing right-of-way on Cherry Street. And I'll get into some complications with each of these options and some benefits in a second. Option 3 in the top right, we don't touch the existing structure and we build a new underpass for the streetcar just east of the existing roadway, so to the left of it on this image. And in the option 3, there's currently a rail signal building there. It's actually a heritage structure. And in the option 4 in the bottom right, you see it there. So in option 4, we wouldn't be required to move that building. And I say move, we can't just tear it down because it's a heritage structure. So in option 3, it would require us to actually relocate that building, whereas option 4, we would keep it in place. So option 3 and 4 are our preferred. Reason being with option 1, it's significantly a higher cost and requires replacement of the rail deck, which would cause significant disruption to the rail corridor. And the Union Queens Quay East rail corridor is one of the busiest passenger, or maybe the busiest passenger rail corridor in Canada. So disruption to that rail corridor, we want to keep to a minimum. And then the option 2, which was the mixed traffic, the roadway would need to be lowered to accommodate clearance for streetcars, which would lead to greater flooding issues and would also cause greater traffic concerns. So option 3 and 4 are what we're moving towards 10% design, and we're looking for public's feedback on whether or not they would like to see this Cherry signal rail tower kept in place, the signal building in this image, or whether it can be moved. So this is the existing condition. This is the distillery loop. So when the streetcar extends, the existing distillery loop would be removed, creating an opportunity in that space to create an enhanced public realm in the surrounding area. Ultimately, this service, currently the 504A, that would extend south from its current terminus all the way to the loop on Polson via Cherry Street. So a loop at Cherry and Polson, which is part of the Waterfront Transit Network plan. So here's just a slightly other version where we actually, the version I showed, the option 3, that's where we move the building just north of the tracks. And then option 4 is where we keep the building in place and the tracks align around it. So there are some technical merits to each of these, which we'll get to in more detail probably in our next round of consultation. But we're looking for feedback on whether, and the questionnaire also includes a question on what the preference is between option 3 and 4, and whether what you see the opportunity for the public realm to be here as well. So now we'll just get into the phasing and implementation. The phasing of Union Station and Queens Quay Ferry Dock Station, expediting interim transit to Queens Quay East, network phasing and implementation and coordination. So back in the winter, we asked 3 different questions. The first one was how much expansion work is needed in Union Station in phase 1 of the project. So as Vincent confirmed, we're just confirming that the full 4-platform design for Union Station, the full concept for Queens Quay Ferry Dock Station is required to accommodate 2041 travel demand, and therefore it's recommended that it is built in the first phase of this project. So that's the full vision of the concept that Vincent shared with you. So the next question was, can East Bayfront Transit service be expedited prior to the completion of the Union Station loop? So the short answer is yes. The east-west through track at the foot of Bay and construction of Queens Quay East prior to the completion of Union Station will allow for the streetcar service to East Bayfront to be expedited. With this infrastructure in place, it would be feasible for the TTC to operate through east-west streetcar service as part of the temporary service changes required during the Union Station construction. Just a note that timing of the expedited streetcar service is subject to funding and refinement of the project schedule. So the third question we asked is, where in the east should the phase 1 implementation of the network be run to? And it's just a note that everything you see in blue, in the blue line here, is part of the full Waterfront Transit Network plan. But we're really just asking, and 4 options were asked, where in phase 1 of the plan, so by the year 2031, should the streetcar network run to? So we looked at the Parliament Loop option, running from Union Station to Distillery as phase 1, or Union Station to Polson Loop as phase 1, or Union Station to East Harbor as phase 1. So some of the evaluation of these options. So with Parliament Loop, it's not preferred as there is limited space to locate the loop due to the advancement of the quayside development. It also does not deliver the same network benefits of transit before development in the Eastern Waterfront and the Portlands like some of the other options do. It also still requires a significant investment. So a big chunk of money would be required to get to that point. So because we would need to construct Union Station. So there's a bit of a lost opportunity to make all that investment and only go as far as Parliament when there's an opportunity for a little bit of incremental increase in cost to go further east. So the option of the Distillery Loop in phase 1, the Distillery Loop cannot be maintained once the alignment travels under the rail corridor due to grading and space requirements, and requires an unplanned temporary loop somewhere else along the line. Alternatively, we could build Distillery, but first we would have to go to Polson Loop, because that's where the streetcar would have to loop around. But there's also higher risks with delivering Distillery Loop option in phase 1, as it's would coincide with the construction of some other major infrastructure projects like the Ontario Line and the Lakeshore and Gardiner realignment. So our preference is to go to Polson Loop as part of phase one from Union Station to Polson Loop, because it has similar costs to going to Distillery Loop, but without the as many constructability risks. It also has the benefit of delivering transit to Villiers and South River and Polson precincts, which aren't yet developed, but will be soon. So there's a desire to bring the line there prior to development, aligning with city policy in that regard. Also, Cherry Street and the Cherry Street Transit Bridge, which I referenced earlier, the bridge you can see across the heating channel is already in place. The Portland's flood as part of the Portland's flood protection project. So, and then looking at Union Station all the way to East Harbor, it's a bit of a stretch for phase one. It's also because it's reliant on several other infrastructure investments, design and environmental studies that are not yet funded. So it's not recommended that we go to all the way to East Harbor in phase one delivery of the project. So just recapping, this is our preferred phase one, which is Union to a loop at Polson. This is in the context of the broader streetcar and bus network. I should just emphasize that the bus routing is just for conceptual purposes. It's not final, but just to show how the gaps could be filled in the network if we went from Union Station to Polson in phase one. So this is the day that Union Station would reopen after construction, and streetcars are now leaving Union Station and traveling to Polson Loop and coming back. So some important, I mentioned earlier with going north on Cherry first, there are some complications with all the future construction projects happening in the area. So this will probably be easier to view separately or online on your own time, so you can look at it in a bit more detail, but really just identifying all the other major infrastructure projects happening in this decade. And also we've indicated our preferred sequencing of our project elements from 1 to 7, starting with the slips, and then Queens Quay East and the portals, and then Union Station and Queens Quay Ferry Dock Station. So there's more details on this as we get into further level of design and once construction mitigation strategy is more detailed, but at a high level, at least one lane of traffic in each direction will be maintained at all times during construction on Queens Quay East. Also, access to all buildings will always be maintained, and there will be an emphasis on pedestrian and cyclist connection and mitigating impacts during construction per construction management guidelines. Also, there will be a business access plan and communications plan that will emphasize how businesses can remain open during construction. So just a quick recap or update on the transit project assessment process. That's the environmental assessment process for this project. As Nigel mentioned, when we go to council in the fall with the updated business case, we'd also be asking council to endorse the draft environmental project report, which would then be released, and that would kickstart what's called the 120-day review period. So that's reviewed by stakeholders in the public for a 120-day period running into February. And then the final EPR, we would take public comment and stakeholder comment. We would refine the draft environmental project report and publish a final environmental project report. Then there will be a 30-day review and rejection period of that project report before it goes to the provincial minister for approval in next spring. So future engagement in the fall of 2021 will focus on the plan for Bay Street after reconstruction, as Vincent mentioned some of the opportunities at Bay Street, the phasing and implementation update, more design details on Area 2B, a summary of the updated business case, which will go to council, and key project impacts and mitigations documented in the draft EPR. So that's it for me. I probably took a little bit more time than I was hoping, but I hope I gave you a fulsome review of the project update. And now I'll hand it back over to Liz to facilitate the discussion.
Great. Thanks, Alex, Vincent, and Nigel. That was very helpful. I just want to remind people of how to participate in case you haven't done so yet. So as a reminder, you can post your questions in the Q&A box, which is below. You can also raise your hand. You can see that at the bottom just says raise hand. It'll look like that. I can see a list of people that have already raised their hands. I've got 3 people, which is great. And we've got lots of questions coming through the questions and answers, and my colleague James is going to help me work through those Q&A. As a reminder, you can also see the questions. So if you take a look at them and like one particularly, you can like it. So so you can just note that you like that question. There are quite a few people on the phone. I think about 10 of the almost 250 participants. For those of you who are on the phone, Alex, if you could just go to the next slide. As a reminder, if you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and you can press *6 to unmute. So, and we ask everyone, once you've been able to ask your question, if you can lower your hand. So essentially, you can ask questions about any of the 5 topic areas that you have heard about tonight. As you noted from Alex from WT, there's still lots of time for feedback and future engagement. As a reminder, we are writing a report, so we will endeavor to get to as many questions as possible. We have about an hour. I've noted also in the Q&A, we have a lot of feedback coming through in terms of comments. So just to note that we'll carry those forward and document them in our summary report. And of course, we'll try and get to as many questions as possible tonight. And for any that we can't get to, we'll still cover them as a summary in our report. So with that, that's it from me. I'm wondering if the team wants to drop the slides for now, and you can pull them up if there's any technical input. So maybe that people can see who is here to answer their questions. And I'm going to go to the first person that I see with their hand up, Dane. Dane, I'm going to just click your, you should be allowed to unmute yourself. Dane, are you there? Okay, I'm going to try one more time for Dane. If not, okay, I'm going to go down the list, and Dane, I will come back to you. Renee, you should have a request to be able to unmute yourself. Renee? Okay, I'm going to keep going down the list to Michael. Michael, you should be able to unmute yourself. You should have an invitation.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question for Vincent, and you used the term wayfinding, and I'm just coming to grips with what that is right now. And I'd like you, if you could just kind of expand on what are the AODA requirements that deal with wayfinding, like signage should have standardized fonts and features and this kind of, contrasting colors. If you could go through that a little bit to explain what wayfinding is.
Certainly. So currently, the current design focus for the station is making sure the station is sized properly in terms of the pathway width, platform size, and ensuring clear sight lines to ensure the wayfinding design, when the design is progressed beyond the current 30% design phase, adequate space provisions for clear signage, whatnot is protected for. So when the details comes in, essentially the station sizing does not need to be modified. So wayfinding, TTC does have a fairly comprehensive wayfinding guideline for all these underground transit station designs. You mentioned already, you covered the basis in terms of the direction for the size and location of these overhead signage to direct passengers, to connecting platforms to the exits, emergency exits, the need for proper tactile strips in the platform itself to ensure people with disabilities has a way around the station as well. And that also covers, as detailed as the elevator push buttons, where there's a requirement to make sure, again, the push buttons meets the requirement for that compliance as well. So currently the design really focuses on, with those design guidelines, ensuring the station sizing is sized properly, so that as the design move forward, everything's protected for.
Great, thanks, Vincent. And Michael, does that help answer your question?
Thanks very much. That's great.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, I'm going to go to Haimchand. Haimchand, you should receive an invitation to unmute. Haimchand. Are you there?
Oh, I have to unmute myself and unmute myself.
Oh, there you are. You're there.
Thank you very much. I was talking away and obviously you weren't hearing me. Well, you mentioned the turnaround points. You had, there was the Cherry Street turnaround point. I'm not sure what that was called. And then there was the East Gateway or something. And then there was the Polson one. Do you have a preference, or were you looking for consultation on that?
Yeah, our technical preference is for phase one to go to Polson Loop first, mainly due to the complications with going to Distillery first, although it is our intent to eventually build out the full network in the fullness of time. Yeah, Polson Loop in phase one.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. You have the time, you have the area, and you have you can build around it because there's nothing there. So I wanted to vote for the Polson Loop if that was possible.
Okay, and we're also asking, to finish your question, we are also asking for people's opinion on these various options as well. So everyone feel free to chime in on that.
Thank you.
Yep. For sure. Thank you. Thank you, Haimchand, and thank you, Nigel, for clarifying that. We certainly want feedback on everything that that was presented tonight. And as a reminder, there's also a questionnaire that's going live, and we can post that so you have it by the end of tonight. All right, so I'm going to go down to a call-in user 2. Hopefully this works. And James, I'm going to go to you for the Q&A. So call-in user 2. As a reminder, press *6 to unmute yourself. There we
Hello.
are. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, calling user 2.
What is your name?
It's Fred.
Hi, Fred.
Just a few things. The Polson Loop makes sense on so many things, but also that is an area that we'll be developing. So having transit go that way as things start to open will encourage people to actually discover that area, because it's harder to get there now. If you're not a transit user, it's difficult to get there. So it has an added advantage of encouraging people to get used to some place, and then we can discover more places as we go. The canopies on the at Bay Street, great idea, because as well as adding art and presence, might actually be a visible warning to drivers that they're going someplace that they shouldn't be. It might just have an added benefit. You didn't mention it, and I thought, let's just give you that way. It's like, honey, there's a roof. And I want to congratulate you on when we were talking about the intersections and how these areas meet the street at the intersections. Thank you for reflecting both the lessons we have learned on Queen Street, Queens Quay West, and listening to the feedback from the public. A lot of the issues really had to do with visually assessing what the area was saying to us. So crosswalks running past the Goodman Trail tells us that that's not a pedestrian place where we can stop and have a chat. Things like that. This will help. And I hope that some of these improvements start to roll out on the west side as well in the future as things have to be changed, remodeled, repaired. It's about visual communication and very much part of wayfinding, because people find their way not just by signs and being told, but by what the surroundings tell them, and then sets up expectations. So congratulations, because some of what you've shown us today says that you're listening, but also will improve just what our surroundings communicate to us. Oh, and also, I know that it's still study to come and consultation to come, but if I had my way right now, I'd leave the signal building where it is and just go north, because somehow I have a funny feeling in the end that would be cheaper than building a foundation and moving a building onto it and then, putting a hole where the building was. We have to put a hole someplace anyhow. So why move the building? Just reduce the amount of trees, and people can actually see the building that we're keeping, because we're keeping it for some reason, and that would be its heritage. Its heritage, and that has to do with the look of it. But hey, I know, that was just concept stuff, and the pink was pretty. Anyhow, thank you so much for this opportunity. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Fred. I'm going to go over now to James, who's working through the Q&A. So James, why don't we go through some questions that you're getting there?
Great, thanks, Liz. A question of clarification for Vincent. Is the 4-platform setup for Union enough platforms to handle the Bremner streetcar if built in the future?
Yes, the sizing of the Union Station platform fully accounts for the future forecast demand in terms of the streetcar volumes that will be coming into the station. In terms of the protection for the Bremner station, perhaps I can ask Nigel to speak to that Bremner line protection potential.
Yeah, so we're just going through a review of our official plan and the transit lines that are in the official plan. There are some things coming in the future along that Bremner corridor, and I think a couple other people have mentioned this in the Q&A as well too. The Bremner line has always been a long-term protection for us, and I think after going through this part of the study in the 30% design, we debated whether we would take it out and not protect for it, but I think it makes sense to keep it in and protect for it in the event that it's required in the future. And that will be subject to a number of things happening in the corridor. We've all heard the news about the Rogers Center and other projects to the west.
Great, James. Keep going.
Great. Our next question, what is the rationale behind building a huge wave deck, which would cover a good half of the water space in the Yonge Street slip? Why can't the existing vast area of today's parking lot on the east side of the slip be used for the same purpose?
I think Alex from Waterfront Toronto, maybe that question could go to you, or Pina.
Why don't I take it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So in terms of wave decks, we've already built 3, as everyone knows, as part of the Central Waterfront public realm improvements. One at Spadina, one at Reese, and one at Simcoe Slip. All of those wave decks are built, it's a system. They're pretty similar. They're built out over the water from the dock wall at the edge of Queens Quay. And the intention behind them is that they really alleviate the pinch points that happen when the lake comes north and hits Queens Quay, and create amazing gathering spaces at those pinch points. And if anyone remembers what Simcoe used to look like, it was a very narrow sidewalk and a rusty guardrail, and we put in the Simcoe wave deck, widened the sidewalk, and now you have a really amazing place to meet and gather. So I think the idea here is to do the same thing for Yonge Slip and put in a wave deck here where you could gather, meet your friends right over the water, and really have the experience of being on a deck over the lake. The park next door, the future park next door, the parking lot today, is just bonus over and above the wave deck. And as you know, at places like Simcoe or Spadina, there are open spaces right next to the wave deck. Spadina right next door has the Spadina Key wetland that works in conjunction. You can meet your friends at the wave deck, but you could also be exploring the Spadina Key wetland right next door. So it's following the exact same language that we've created at other places on the waterfront.
Thank you, Pina, for clarifying. James, let's keep hearing because I know you've got lots of questions that are coming through.
There are lots. Another question for Vincent. Has the design team considered the potential to remove the need for elevators and to improve mobility for large crowds by incorporating ramps rather than stairs? In the individual notes, particularly north of Queens Quay.
The sizing, actually both projects size Union Station and Queens Quay Station, one of the key project constraints is really available site area to accommodate the station functions. In this case is the entrance locations and for accessibility. Certainly, I think provision of a ramp in lieu of much more efficient elevators. We don't have the property for it, and as I said, certainly provision of elevators certainly is a much more efficient, a faster way of providing accessible access for passengers from the underground level to the street level, which is actually at a fairly significant depth from the street level. Certainly, again, picture that with ramps and the need to, making sure the gradient ramp complies with the people using, let's say, mobility devices. Certainly, we simply don't have the footprint for that at Queens Quay Station, and certainly elevators are the best way of accommodating that accessibility requirements. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Vincent. I'll do one more from the chat, Liz.
Yep.
This one's for Alex. What is the timeline for connecting to East Harbor if it's not part of phase 1? Is funding being sought?
Maybe I can tackle that one. Yeah. That's probably a better question for me. So when we showed the presentation, we indicated that all of those options to East Harbor, to Polson, all of those lines are actually part of the Waterfront Transit Network that's already improved by Council. And it in fact includes the extension all the way over to Leslie Barnes, which I think someone else also mentioned in the Q&A. The scope of our project right now for this 30% design is over to the Cherry Street corridor roughly. We looked at other options in case it made sense. The next phase of the study, subject to funding, of course, we would proceed with completing EA work that's required in those areas over to East Harbor. And in fact, all the way over to the Leslie Barnes, that still has to be done, as well as undertaking the 30% design exercise, the same as we're doing right now. So that's to come in the future. And in terms of timelines, I could just add that ultimately, we're hoping to get to the Leslie Barnes by the year 2041, approximately.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nigel. Alex, did you have anything to add or can we keep going? Alex, you're on mute.
Yeah, we could keep going, hopefully get more topics in.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go back to the hands up or the live questions. So Naomi, I'm going to invite you to talk. So I'm going to invite you to unmute and you should be able to ask your question. There we go. Naomi, you're there.
Thank you so much. In regards to the Young Slip, how will the coaches or delivery trucks or vehicles enter that area and park now closer to the hotel? How will that traffic flow going in and going out?
Okay, so I'll look at either Alex or Pina. Alex, you're sharing your screen. So do you want to talk a little bit about parking and traffic flow in regards to Young Slip?
Yeah, I'll just flip to an image where I can describe it better. Just give me 1 second. Probably, this image is probably best. So the coaches would come in off a signalized intersection at Yonge Street. and would come in here and then go in this, sorry, my cursor wasn't, would come in off of Yonge Street and then go south down here, down this laneway, and loop around, and there would be a couple bus parking bays here. There would also be bus parking bays on this side. And then coming out, they would go out this way. Vehicles accessing the hotel, cars and taxis, could come in here and go just straight through and into the hotel. There would be a new entrance to the hotel. Its current north facade entry to the motor court would be repositioned to the east here, where this tree is behind the portal. And then trucks would come in the same route that buses would come in that are accessing the ferry terminal or loading for the hotel. They would come in this way. And the way that we can prevent large trucks from coming straight through is we can just have an overhead clearance bar that prevents larger vehicles from going straight through and just keeps the cars there, and the trucks and buses would go this way. Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Naomi, for your question. I'm good to keep going to Mark. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I first want to applaud number two, Fred. Your comments were all very well supported. The Polson study, I think, or the choice for Polson is a great choice in that it extends, as we said, further east, the access for redevelopment and for everything else. But it also allows us some time to think about or to revisit some of our assumptions when we assumed that the stations were going to be in different places. And with the Ontario line now relocating to Parliament Street, you know, your sketch is actually not correct on the exhibit where it is. It allows hopefully some time for us to assess what is really actually the best place to connect north-south. And whether it's with transit or with buses or with streetcars, you're going to need to have a better connection from the Corktown station to the Queens Quay LRT. And with this pause now with the Cherry Street portal, hopefully we can think of other options, because if you look at other documentation from the city for other reasons, you know, public realm plan and strategic master plan, the importance of Parliament Street really needs to be brought forward again as a major north-south connector to the rest of the east part of the city. And giving this sort of breathing space hopefully allows us some time to reassess where the best way is to go north-south back into the city. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. So hopefully, because of all the other city building possibilities, that we have some time to reconsider these choices. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that feedback, Mark. As a reminder, we are writing a report from this conversation and documenting all feedback and noting there's lots of questions and comments in the Q&A, and we'll try and take we'll try and get as many questions as we can. I'm going to go to Michael, though. Michael, for your live question, you should be able to unmute yourself. Yep.
Thanks again, Liz. I'm just trying to get a handle on the east-west streetcar that's going to bypass all the construction for the Union Station and the Queen Bay. What is the timeline for this? Is this going to happen? Obviously, in my mind, I would think that you'd want to do this before you start and cut off the streetcar to the Union Station. So what's the timeline that you've got for this?
Great, thanks, Michael. And Nigel, I'm wondering, or Vincent?
Perhaps I would suggest Nigel maybe speak to the higher level timeline of this project, and from that I can add to in terms of the next step instead of assessing the when is the earlier potential opening of the east-west streetcar service.
Yeah, so overall in terms of the project, let's say we get the funding approval in the budget process in 2022. we would take the next couple of years to complete the 100% design for the project. And our rough estimate is a construction period roughly between 2024 and 2029, 2030, that time period. So that's from an overall perspective, and Vincent will give you a bit more breakdown on how the sequencing can occur in that timeline.
Sure, thanks, Nigel. So certainly one of the key requirement to allow the start of construction for the East Portal is the completion of the Yonge Street slip filling work. So that will be a sort of the first step in terms of enable to start the construction of the east-west connection related to the tunnel. And one of the key aspects of the design is to assess from a construction perspective, what is the overall timeline that would reduce have the minimal impact to the streetcar service. Obviously, one of the key requirements is to minimize the shut down the streetcar to minimize the use of shuttle buses. So having said that, if this project obtains continuous project funding to proceed to the next step, detailed design, as Nigel pointed out, will take at least a couple of years for the station. So, and the construction portal with after the Yonge Street slip starts, at a high level, I'm estimating there's going to be as a minimum of 2 to 3 years of construction before the potential of east-west service to be able to commenced, and part of that also would be the timing for the at-grade streetcar extension work to the Cherry area. So there's a number of factors, but we're talking about just at a high level, the earliest possible potential will be 3 years, 3 to 4 years of after the commencement of construction for this project.
Great. Thanks, Vincent, and thanks, Nigel.
Thank you for that.
And thank you, Michael, for your question. All right, James, lots of questions coming through the Q&A. I know you're sorting through them, so let's hear some from you.
Thanks, Liz. Our next question, on slide 43, the one about Queens Quay East being pinched around the Redpath Sugar Factory, why are there 3 lanes of traffic? Sorry, it moved on me, 1 second. Why are there 3 lanes of traffic while MGT and the sidewalks are the ones taking a hit? Can the extra traffic lane be removed? And thinking 1 step ahead, can that stretch of Queens Quay East become a one-way for traffic to better serve active transport?
I think we'll ask Mark Paul from Arup, our design consultant, to answer that question.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for the question. Yeah, it's the main area in the whole corridor where we still need to accommodate trucks because of Redpath, and with the redesign of Queens Quay, you can imagine large trucks, in particular like tractor trailer trucks, won't really fit anywhere, and that's actually true in many respects where we can't turn them around the corners because of the much reduced roadway space. So specifically for Redpath and also Loblaws, trucks now have to come in at Yonge and then exit at Jarvis. And that's really the only way they can come in. They can't come in really any other way or exit any other way in the future. Unless, of course, maybe like late at night when there's no other traffic. So in front of Loblaws, there's a second lane eastbound for trucks for 2 reasons. There's inbound at that center driveway and then also outbound at the center driveway. And the turning path of the truck's quite large, and it takes up a couple lanes just to turn the vehicle. The reason why there's an inbound is because in the winter, the slip is frozen, the harbor's frozen, and then the big boats can't come in. And so the boats dock out, I think, on the Portlands, and they truck all of the materials in. And so they bring trucks in at the center driveway and then also out at that center driveway. And they need those 2 lanes to be able to make that movement out. And then, of course, the dedicated lane in. And then the next site is Loblaws, where they have the large loading bay there, and they have to come in from that direction as well, turn left and go up into the Loblaws site. So that's why there's 2 lanes there. It's really to accommodate those busy truck lanes. In terms of one way, that hasn't really been considered as part of this process. It was looked at the previous EA many years ago as one of the options, and it wasn't taken forward mainly with the idea to maintain two-way operation on the street. So it hasn't been part of this TPAP because of that prior process.
Maybe just to add one thing about the south side, and that upon redevelopment, if the Sugar Path ever redevelops, we wouldn't have to realign the streetcar in this configuration. We could just immediately extend the Martin Goodman Trail and Promenade South. So the diagram that we showed, the streetcar alignment is actually in its final alignment in that condition as well. Whereas if we pinch the road, the streetcar alignment would have to, I'm trying to use my hand to show how the alignment, but it would have to be tweaked north compared to the rest of the streetcar alignment.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, Paul, and Alex. Our next question. At one point during the preliminary discussions of this project, it was suggested that perhaps a continuous cable car system could be implemented between Union Station and the streetcar line along Queens Quay. Did I miss something and that idea was killed already, or is there any chance that it could be integrated in the final design with the added benefit of avoiding the streetcars having to go all the way to Union Station and the high capacity of the cable car line to move passengers without delay?
Thanks, James. I saw that one in the Q&A as well, and I'll provide the answer for that one. So yes, you did miss something. Actually, we reported out on that one in April of 2019, and we provided our recommendation to council on the preferred option, which was the streetcar solution over the people mover that was considered at the time. I won't go into all of the details, but there are a number of factors that we considered in that. And the overriding factor was the network benefits of the streetcar over the people mover in that context. And council accepted our recommendation, which brought us to our 30% design, which we're presenting to you today.
Great, thank you, Nigel. Our next question. Agree that the Polson Loop option makes sense as a first step. Would the connection to Distillery proceed quickly afterwards and be considered part of the same overall project seeking approval later this year? Or would it need to proceed as a distinct project at an undefined later date? It is an important connection on the east side, and it would be disappointing to see this deferred indefinitely or for a long time.
Yeah, so quickly, the answer is that we would be providing a cost estimate that goes with this design, and that would be for the preferred solution. If we continue on that path, it would be the Polson Loop in this case. Now, we won't be asking for the funding for the Cherry connection. That would be a future project. But what we are hoping to do is complete the 30% design. We already have we would cover the environmental assessment approval through this process. We would cover the 30% design hopefully through this process as well. So we would be in a good position to move ahead with that project subject to funding being available. But that's not likely to happen in the next year. That would be a longer term process.
Great, thank you, Nigel. One more question, then I think we'll go back to Liz with the hands. So this question relates to sight lines to the water in relation to the slips. An individual is wondering how high will trees be on Queens Quay where the slip fill will be?
Thinking maybe Pina, do you want to field that one?
Sure, I'm going to say that predicting how high trees will be is very difficult. The trees that would be planted along Queens Quay and in the landscape that Alex presented just a little while ago would be planted at a similar caliber that have been planted on Queens Quay West. So, you know, I'm a landscape architect who doesn't know much about the height of trees, unfortunately, I'm going to admit, but I would guess that those ones are about, I don't know, 10 to 15 feet tall. And they'll grow much like any other tree with adequate soil for growth. In terms of views, I think that's, an important point. We have been studying views from that building and have been working we've met with residents of 10 Young and 10 Queens Quay, which is the building right across the street from the Young Slip. And we've walked through some different views from 4th floor, from the plaza, from Young, because I think the view down Young is really important, and we want to make sure that that view shed is also maintained for visitors arriving to the waterfront from Young Street.
If I can add to what Pina just said, part of what the design team has been doing is also looking at selecting tree species that have fine textured leaves for those head of slip areas in order to preserve view corridors over the water. And so there will also be a kind of arrangement of tree species to support that, both in terms of seasonal color, but also the kind of transparency over the water and over those slips.
That's a great point, Sonia. Thanks for adding that.
Great. Thanks, Sonia and Pina. James, I'm going to go to the hands up if that's okay. Okay, and for everyone, just a reminder, we are going to be writing a report from this conversation tonight. We also have a questionnaire that's going to be open until July the 6th. So if we're going to post that in the chat soon in terms of where you can access that. We're trying to get through as many questions as we can tonight. If we can't, we're also going to incorporate the questions in the summary report. We do have those documented, so I just wanted to flag that. And James is working on trying to bring questions together. So we're trying to get to all the questions. All right. So I'm going to go to Nawaf. I hope I pronounced your name okay. Nawaf, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question or provide your comment or feedback.
So I do have a couple of comments and a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
So one comment is one of them is about the walkway in the underground station. It is kind of worrying that there would be a walkway that would slow down streetcars, especially in an underground station where they will be coming through a tunnel, won't be able to see, so they have to stop. So I feel like, especially that there's going to be so many streetcars coming through, it would be better if it was separated like in the original plan. If there's an elevator for each platform, I don't see the need for the pass through unless there's an elevator down. Otherwise, if there's only one elevator currently, that one is down, then, well, no way to come down in a wheelchair. So that doesn't really help accessibility. So that's one worry of mine. I do like the station in general, though, and with the connections with the other buildings. Another note is about the place. At the distillery loop. I don't think you mentioned the pros and cons between the options that went forward. Like, what is the reason why you would move the building when, like someone else has said, it might increase the effort if you're already going to be building a portal anyway? For me personally, I do see one good thing about moving the building and making the streetcar route straight is that for pedestrians and the streetcar driver, having a straight route might be more safe. So you can see further down the line. That way people could be more careful. It also seems to not cut through the park. So there would be one park on one side and a streetcar on the other, giving more people space to spread out their activities. So that would be really useful, but either one still works, but I feel like the straight line might be better off, like for the points I just said. One last kind of outlandish thought of mine, saying that I live on Bay Street, and I've always wondered if there would be ever like a streetcar line going down Bay Street, because I'm at Bay and Girard, and there's the streetcar tracks with no streetcars on them going up in north-south. I feel like one day it would be nice if that line becomes a north-south all the way from Union. It's kind of, yeah, like a big, crazy project, but I was wondering if that ever was considered by the city.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. So first, I'm just going to, the second question or comment I'm going to take as a comment in terms of, you know, a pro, I guess, to moving the building is to make the route straight. Vincent, I want to go to Nawaf's first kind of comment and question around the walkway under the station,
Sure.
people not being able to stop. And you
Sure,
know,
I can. Yep.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
provide some comment in that
Just to
context.
touch
So
on accessibility too, I think that was part of the comment. And then I think I'll go to, maybe you can answer the next one about whether it's ever been a consideration to have a TTC or sorry, streetcar at Bay Street.
thanks, Nawa, for your comment regarding Queens Quay Station. So just to clarify, at Queens Quay Station, the design certainly provides for more than one accessible path, and we do have a proposed enhanced elevator on the west side, west platform. And on the east platform, I think the current design approach is be really integrated access, accessible access via the future redevelopment of the 11 Bay. So with that said, in terms of the level crossing, in general, maintaining this level crossing at the station is acceptable to the TTC given the sort of the headways that's expected. You know, when as part of the regular day-to-day service, when passenger volumes are lower. Two key benefit of that level crossing is it provides for redundancies for accessibility in the event that one of the elevators to the street level is out of service. Secondly, the crossing could also make transfer between different streetcar routes simpler if the through service is not readily provided. You're concerned about delay? Yes. During busy times or special events, it may be necessary, yeah, to close this crossing to minimize delays to streetcars. And so access in this case to street level would still be maintained at all times via the direct access to each platform, either from the west or the east side of Bay Street. The crossing will be designed so that it can be effectively closed for passenger use remotely and or by station staff to sort of consider those busy or special events time periods. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Vincent. And who from the TTC can answer now's question about, you know, is it ever going to be a possibility if there's a streetcar on Bay Street?
So it's Scott Haskell here from TTC. It's really a city call on that sort of thing. We have not in recent decades looked at surface streetcar extension on Bay Street. Nigel, you could talk about how it fits into the city's general transportation plans.
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little earlier, we have the official plan, which identifies our rapid transit corridors in that plan. Bay Street is not part of that plan, and that's based on previous studies. It's based on our long-term projections that we do for population and employment. And I think a big factor in that is that the fact that we have two subway lines running on either side of Bay Street is a huge factor in that. But we do update those that work quite frequently, and so far there has not been a strong case for extending a streetcar service north on Bay Street.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nigel, and thanks, Noah, for your questions and comments. All right, I'm going to go.
Liz, can I just clarify? Yeah. There was some points there that we'll just take as comments on the loop, but someone else was asking about options 3 and 4, whether both would remove the loop, and the quick answer is yes for that. So I'm just trying to cover off some of the things I'm seeing in the chat.
Awesome, and we will get back to the chat in a moment. I've got a call in user 1. I'm going to allow you to talk. Press *6 to unmute yourself and you should be able to ask your question. Call in user 1, press *6. Yep, I see you're off mute. If you just want to introduce yourself and ask your question. You there? Okay, yep. Okay, it doesn't look like that is working, so I will give that a shot in a second. James, maybe we can go back over to you because there's lots of questions and comments coming through.
I know there's a comment the team wants to respond to. We have a few along this line. Given that there is no need to fill in this much of the slip, this seems to be the start of filling in the slips. Slip fill, if at all needed, can be limited by having no buses here at all. They will be parked on filled land, which is not a necessity.
Yeah, I think I can take that, and I'll try to answer this question as well as a few of the other questions in the chat related to the merits of our portal location decision, as well as the impacts on filling in the slip and the reasons for doing so. But to start with, so we did, prior to the winter consultation, do a technical analysis of the portal option east of Yonge Street and the portal option west of Yonge Street. And we presented that analysis at the winter public meeting, identifying that evaluation of the east and west portal. And the findings of that indicated that a portal option west of Yonge Street would save the project between $40 and $50 million in capital costs for the project, as well as reduce construction impacts with a lesser tunnel section, and also open up the opportunity with those cost savings to invest in an enhanced public realm at the base of Yonge Street as a part of mitigating that decision. Should also note that as part of the reason we have to fill in Yonge Street, the portion of the Yonge Street slip, is because with the portal in that location, we block the two current driveways. One driveway to the hotel motor court and the other driveway to the ferry docks where island residents get deliveries through, and where trucks that service the island and service the ferry docks have to go. So we needed to replace those functions, and we've done so with an intersection at the base of Yonge Street and the driveways that facilitate those movements for those coach buses, as well, that we replaced on Queens Quay, as well as the truck movements. So it's as much about access as it is about anything in reinstating that access. And it's also about leveraging that opportunity for that partial fill in, create an iconic public realm at the base of Yonge Street, improving on the condition that exists today. And that's I just want to mention that we've met quite extensively with the residents across the street. We were at the town hall last week and we heard their concerns, and we continue to. We've also met with two or three separate occasions since February, the group appointed by the board of directors or the condo board at that location. And we've continued to work with them on how we can improve the design of the slip to alleviate their concerns, primary of which being the views, which we've done so, and better integrating the public realm. So we have a job to do, which is to balance all the needs of these stakeholders and public. And we heard a lot of great feedback on this comment in our last public meeting in the winter. And I think our questionnaire, which had over 400 responses, there was a 66% preference for that option west of Yonge Street. So although we recognize the concern of this group of residents, we continue to try to work with you to mitigate these concerns. But it is continued to be our preferred option that goes through 30% design for the merits that I mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And why we are here tonight as well, to hear from people about questions and concerns. James, I'm hoping you can you can keep going because I know you've got a lot in front of you.
Sure. Another question for the team. What aspects of the design of these areas were influenced by flood control considerations? For example, correction of problematic situations or avoidance of future flooding.
Pina.
I was going to say, Sonia, do you
Sonia.
want to talk about how we're working on grading to make sure? I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so we didn't show it in this consultation, but in the previous public meeting, we had shown how the lake level, the regulatory lake levels by the TRCA have substantially been raised in recent years in response to the high lake level events that we've had in the past couple of years. So the teams, both for 2A and 2B, are looking at elevating grades where possible, where it is possible to tie in to adjacent conditions where there isn't a lot of existing development. So in area 2B, for example, there will be some gradual raising of grades between Parliament and Cherry to elevate both infrastructure under the road, but also the planting of the trees to keep them safely out of the higher groundwater. And then in area 2A, where it's less possible to raise the grades holistically through the whole area because of existing development, the planting zones, the planting strips are being elevated slightly, mounded up in order to raise the root balls of the trees above the expected high lake level and high groundwater level to keep the trees healthy and to keep them safe from the risk of flooding. I know that doesn't address, the water's edge flooding, but in terms of Queen's Quay and keeping the streetscape elevated, those are some of the ways that the design teams are addressing higher water levels in the area.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sonia. I'm going to go to a phone-in person on the phone who has their hand up. So I'm just going to invite you. It's 532 is the beginning of the phone number. If you press *6, you should be able to unmute yourself. Beginning of the phone number is 532. Hello. If you can just introduce yourself, please. Hi there.
Margaret Copeland.
Hi,
Hello?
Margaret. Hi.
Hi. I live on the island, and I'm happy to have been listening. My major concern is a simple one. It's very nice that everything is also beautiful at the Union Station stop for the streetcars. It is very wet down there. There is moisture all the time at the Union Station stop and at the Queen's Quay stop. It often is quite slippery. There's even signs up. Is this matter going to be cleared up? Vincent, can you answer that?
Yeah, of course. TTC in designing for rehabilitation of existing station, and also in our case, rebuilding of the two stations, really, of course, is looking at lessons learned from other similar project, and in particular for the underground station size share at the very high water table that the design team is well aware. So with that in mind, design accounts for the expected nature of the, I guess, the water level, and through design details, there will be implementation of a robust waterproofing system, again taking some recent subway projects that the TTC's implemented to ensure first of all, the infiltration of water is really water finds its way through cracks, whatnot, that would develop in concrete, underground concrete structures over the years. But the first key step to minimize that top water infiltration is through robust and waterproofing detail that the TTC through past projects are implementing from lessons learned. Having said that, there will be secondary measures in the eventual case where there will be waters decades down the road that will be dripping from here and there. So there are other secondary measures that will be considering design, such as placement of strategic placement of ventilation shaft openings, for example, away from the public area, and secondary controls as well that can be, I guess, designed into the underground infrastructure such that at the end of the day, there's the water that will come in is not impacting public safety, and the station, as part of the ongoing maintenance work, remains in a state of good repairs.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand, because I know wet and I know dry.
Mm-hmm.
And when you use the word robust, that doesn't mean anything to me. It's a pretty word, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really make me sure that instead of the conditions in the Union Station at the streetcar stop and at the Queens Quay streetcar stop, that it will be dry instead of constantly wet.
Yeah, I can tell you that. I can tell you that just again from lessons learned, the current underground stations at Union and Queens Quay, the previous design or construction used a what we call a supportive excavation system that at the end of the day didn't work too well. So for this project, we're not going to be implementing what's called the slurry wall system as sort of the supportive excavation. We will be utilizing a more of a, I wouldn't say completely fail-safe, but sort of a very, I guess, good watertight what's called the secant pile system. So that on top of I like to use the word robust again, a very thick and well detailed and well applied. Think about it as a waterproofing system outside of the finished station box that we believe in the long run the public will see significant improvement to the conditions on the ground compared to the current issues that you're experiencing at both stations.
So just to recap, it won't be dry, but it will be less wet. Is that what you're saying?
We cannot, as I said, water makes its way into underground structures over time. So from that perspective, it will not be like dry, but
But we're hearing loud and clear. So we've got this documented. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Vincent.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to ask Alex Mirio to pull up next steps, so you can let everyone know as we are at we're almost at 9 here. So if you can just share next steps, and as a reminder, thanks so much for everyone coming tonight. We are writing a report based on everything we've been hearing, and for the questions we couldn't get to, or the most commonly asked questions we couldn't get to this evening, we are going to incorporate those into our report, and I will tell you how to participate using our questionnaire, so you can continue to provide us feedback after tonight. So Alex, back to you.
Thank you, Liz. So in terms of next steps, as we wrap up the 30% design for these project areas, we'll produce an updated cost estimate for what it would take to build it. And then we'll bring that estimate into the business case that's being produced that will be presented to council in the fall. The business case is a list of all the project benefits weighed against the project costs. And then we'll produce the draft environmental project report, which will catalog all of this engagement effort, as well as all of the project details and impacts and mitigations. And then we'll report to council in the fall of 2021. We'll also have further consultation with stakeholders, directly with stakeholders over the next few months. And then we'll culminate with our next public meeting in the fall. So we'll see you all again then.
Can we just mention about posting of the presentation? A lot of people normally ask about that and the timing for getting that up on the website.
Yeah, so both the presentation as well as the live this live recording will be up within the next couple of days. Yeah. So when you'd like to either find the online questionnaire or the presentation or the live recording from this meeting, you can visit the project website at toronto.ca/waterfront transit, and the questionnaire is live now, so you can fill it in as well. You can contact the project team at Waterfront Transit at toronto.ca, and the phone number is 416-338-2848. And I believe that the presentation is actually already up, so you can access that, but we will put the recording of the meeting up as soon as we can. All right, so with that, thanks so much for attending this evening. It's always important to hear your voices and make sure that we've got great input into this project. The team will take that into consideration, and we will see you in the fall. Thank you
Liz,
so much.
can I just
Yep.
take a second to thank everybody? I think
Sure.
we've had such tremendous attendance tonight. It's incredible. I think we hit over 250 attendance, and I tried to figure out how many questions, but I lost track at 100. So I wanted to thank everyone for their amazing questions, great feedback. This was a crowd that certainly knew their stuff. So we really appreciate that, and can promise that these will all get integrated into our reports, but also next time around, you should see changes that reflect the feedback we got tonight. So thank you everyone for spending their Monday night with us. Go enjoy the last few minutes of sunlight, if there is any left.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.